Hello, my friends, and I hope you're having a fantastic day. We're trying a little bit of a new layout. Let me know what you think. Just thought it might be fun to try something different. And today we are going to cover two things that are making me a little irritable. I've talked about it before. I'll talk about it again. But I have 3 articles pulled up. I don't think we're going to read through them this time. They're just here to serve as reminders as to what I'm talking about. The first one you see here, DragonAge, the Veilguard skips fan favorite Blood Mage class specialization because its, quote, nasty parts aren't where BioWare want the hero to walk. Now, while I understand in many cases that a game developer will set a narrative that they want a character to walk, in a role-playing game, specifically, to narrow that down too much feels very disingenuous. It feels like you are trying to be a little too controlling. And in many ways, I'm sure they don't want to deal with parts of the narrative. They don't want to have to deal with writing those parts of the narrative. For all we know, they very well ran out of time to write that much, and they need to get this out the door. They did spend an awful lot of time trying to start this as an MMO project, and people shouted that down years ago. And I do think that's actually a lot of what we're seeing now, is the fact that when they were going to make it an MMO project, they had to dumb down a lot of stuff. They changed, obviously, the art style to be more conducive to being streamed as opposed to really being more single player focused, and there is a difference in art style that you use in that, especially when you want to bring in a much larger crowd than what you were anticipating just your single player game bringing in. And a lot of these design decisions were decided long before they decided to switch it back to a single player game, because that's what people expect from Dragon Age, and we don't want a Dragon Age MMO. We don't want a Dragon Age multiplayer game. Is it a little bit of co-op fun? Yeah, sure, but nobody wanted an MMO. And I imagine that's part of why you also can only use 2 companion parties. First, it makes it narratively more easy to build, because they don't have to worry about as much in terms of dialogue between the characters to keep up with previous games. And they don't have to worry about as much interplay in general. When the game was being developed, the more action-based gameplay was very much catching on, the Souls-like gameplay. I will not be surprised at all when this game comes out if they start to say, oh, well, this is Souls-like about it, and this parry stuff is Souls-like, and because that's the big thing right now, is the whole Souls-like trend. And it was becoming a bigger thing when this game came out. The more action-oriented. Part of that is because we obviously have processors in our computers now that are far more, or in not just the computers, we have processors in our gaming systems, in the consoles, in the computers, both, that are more able to handle that kind of movement. But at the same time, that doesn't mean it belongs in every style of game. Having the ability to do something doesn't necessarily mean you have to. And all of this is an attempt to appeal to the largest audience they possibly can, because that's how the world really works in the end, is if you want things, you have to appeal to people. However, you also have to be careful who you're appealing to. If you are trying to appeal to people who generally have no interest in your product, then more likely than not, you're not going to have much success. You have to consider who your audience is, who you want your audience to be. You can't just sit there and think, I want my audience to be everyone, because you will never get everyone in your audience. That's an impossibility. You can sit there and think, I want the audience to be the majority of everyone. That you might be able to do. Now, when you are starting with a game that was admittedly more niche in terms of its audience, a game like Dragon Age, which had a reasonably large fan base of people who very much loved the game, it obviously transcended various groups on its own from the start. To change things too drastically means you are going to lose people. There are people out there who will say, oh, well, that's the way it is. They've changed things, so whatever. If you're happy with it, I'm not going to be one of those people who tells you you can't be happy with it. There are plenty of things I'm happy with that other people don't like. That's a whatever. If my lack of happiness with it affects your happiness, that's a you problem, because your happiness with it doesn't affect me at all. I'm glad you're happy. We don't really have to communicate. Now, if you come across my video and you want to yell at me, go for it. You know what? I am more than glad to listen to your reason. If you make it this far into the video already, you're listening to my reasons for disliking it. I will more than happily read the reasons that you are happy with it. It's called reasonable discourse. Humans should try it a little more often than they do currently. But it seems like even as our technology grows and things progress so that the hardware can do more, it really feels like they're really doing less in gaming. There's so much push to make it look pretty. At this point, I would be just fine with a potato as long as it had a really good story and gameplay. If I could tell where my object is on the screen, hit things appropriately, and everything else, it doesn't have to be the most beautiful thing on earth. I don't need to be able to see the facial hairs on every little woman. But there are people out there who are unhappy with these changes, and we're unhappy for a number of reasons. For one, we liked the way the previous battle systems were. Some people preferred Dragon Age 1 and 2 more. I was okay with Inquisition. Inquisition it felt like a really good balance between the two for me, being able to pause and set up my battles and everything while still being very actiony and all that stuff. Well, you know, some people are very much prefer the way they handled it from the beginning. And, you know, that's fine with me too. I'm okay along the whole spectrum of it. I'm currently replaying Dragon Age Origins and I enjoy it again after we got past that goddamn bug. But all I can think of is going back to Baldur's Gate. When it came out, the number of people who were upset because it was a turn-based game and not an action-based game. It's like there's obviously an audience that wants the tactical stuff. There's no denying that. Because if there wasn't the audience that wanted the tactical stuff, then Dragon Age Origins, Dragon Age 2, Dragon Age Inquisition would have had no audience. Dragon Age Inquisition would have never been Game of the Year because it wouldn't have sold enough. Dragon Age Origins wouldn't have ended up with an Ultimate Edition years later. It would have been left to rot because it didn't sell enough. But there are very obviously people who enjoy that kind of combat. Changing the battle types so that it is more action-oriented so that you can draw in a new audience. You have to anticipate losing the old one. You have to. You can't expect other players to pressure people who loved the game previously into playing it just because, especially not on a single-player game. You're not going to have anybody saying, oh, hey, I found this fantastic single-player game with this battle system that you're not interested in, so come play it, or go play it. Alone. The only reason I play games that I'm kind of iffy on the play style is because I have friends that will play them with me. If I am iffy on the play style and it's a single player game, I just won't get it. There are plenty of games in this world that I don't have to get every game. I can't get every game. I'm not that rich. But Amarada, you're asking me right now in my head because I'm alone talking into a mic, trying to get my thoughts out in a way that sounds semi-coherent. I thought we were going to talk about multiple things. We're just talking about Dragon Age. I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you reminded me. Thank you. Everything I just said about Dragon Age applies to D&D. Everything. From the fact that they're watering it down, to the fact that they're seeking new audiences, and the fact that they are going to lose their current audiences. The major difference between the two is that D&D was always a multiplayer game, obviously, face-to-face. They're trying to monetize it more like a gacha game at this stage, I believe. But at the same time, they're watering it down in hopes of finding new audiences without thinking about the fact they're going to lose their own audience. If you are going to leave your old audience behind, you need to make sure you have a new one. And I don't believe they're going to have the audience they're looking for on either one. Dragon Age and Dungeons and Dragons, both are going to find that the audience that they were looking for isn't as big as they thought. Because the audience they had previously, yes, not everybody in it, or the audience they had previously spanned a number of different categories. And the audience they're going to get now is going to be a much smaller audience, despite not developing a niche product. It's one of those crazy things. A Souls-like game, like Elden Ring, is a very niche product. It's made for a specific type of game player. However, because it is made so well, it has a tendency to bring in people who wouldn't normally play that type. And instead of focusing on making something so good that people who wouldn't normally play your game suddenly start trying it, they're going the other direction. They're making it a game that they think everybody would play, and they're losing the people who would normally play their game. If you haven't looked into what they're doing to the D&D classes, so far of everything I've seen, the wizard subclass changes are probably one of the most egregious things. They've basically taken away, first, how you really deal with your spells in the unique way that wizards dealt with their spells, and the fact that they had so much choice and the ability to continue to learn spells as they went. Which, I mean, that right there just, that takes, in my opinion, takes a major axe to role playing in so many ways. But they've removed so much from it to make it easier for players. Now, I understand why you would want to make it easier for players, but it also shows me you don't understand why some of these classes existed in the way they did. There are so many ways to introduce a new person into D&D and help them get into the point where they're using all the fancy special subclasses. But at the same time, I can't help but wonder if starting with only 4 in the original, in the initial player's handbook, is just a way for them to, down the line, release another book with supplementary ones. You know, we only included these, but now we've come up with all of these. Look, you can buy another whole book where, you know, the other stuff happened to be in the player's handbook. And I'm sure I could go through and look at all the other classes and probably find something along the same way that makes me think the same thing. That trying to turn D&D into a microtransaction ridden hellhole. Dragon Age ending up with a game that likely no one's gonna like because they started with an MMO concept and couldn't break away from a lot of it. And that's my running theory. I have no proof. No one's talked to me or said anything. That is a personal theory, that they had a base built for an MMO experience, and when there was such a huge outcry, because I remember when I read the article on my phone saying that the new Dragon Age was going to be an MMO or multiplayer game, a multiplayer online game, and just thinking, oh, fuck no. God, don't do this to me. And when they were met with such a heavy pushback, they had to shift gears and they had to do it quickly. And they had a lot of work that they didn't want to just scrap. Now, some of it could be because they genuinely loved the work they did. I don't doubt that a number, or even the majority of the people working on Dragon Age genuinely love what they've created. I just think that maybe a lot of them weren't the right people for the job necessarily. We did chronicle a number of the people who left in the process. Many of them have come out now talking about how they approve and how they really think it's going to be great because they worked on this or that on it before they left and they can't wait to see it. But to me, that's them being professional. They really can't say something else without harming themselves in what is an extremely nepotistic profession, especially at this point in time. So what is this video really about? It's really just me rambling on about the fact that I don't like anything they're doing right now in DragonAge and D&D. That's really what it is. It's about the fact that, and it's not just DragonAge and D&D. These are just the two that I love that they're doing it to. It's the fact that across the board, AAA gaming, and obviously what you could consider the leader, previous leader, whatever you want to call it in tabletop, are dumbing down their approach to their customers. And it's not going to help them, because the people who enjoy their product aren't as dumb as they think they are. The people who enjoy their product enjoyed it because it was interesting and complex. And now they are reaching for an audience that exists to some degree, but doesn't exist in the way they think they do. This is the audience that aren't actually gamers. They think they can make a new group of people into gamers. Now, there are surveys out there that say there are more gamers today than ever. And I don't doubt that. With the proliferation of TV, streaming, computers, and all of that in the home, consoles, and everything like that, I don't doubt that at all. The fact that gamers grew up, raised new gamers, and there were new kids who didn't necessarily connect well with their parents. Their parents were maybe a little jockey or whatever, and folded them into gaming. It doesn't at all surprise me. Now, if you're counting mobile games as gaming, that's not gaming. Those are like doing a crossword. It's like saying that the people who sat down and did the Sunday morning crosswords were gamers. They weren't. They're puzzlers, but they're not gamers. They're two different things. But sadly, I think when they look at these, they look at the phone as gaming, and people are thus calling themselves gamers while playing phone games, which is why you get a falsely inflated amount of female gamers. But again, whatever. Doesn't really matter. And it will matter less when this releases. And I'm not going to say it's going to straight up flop. DragonAge is still a name. And I think it'll do not as good as they hope, but not straight up flop. That's my prediction. My prediction on the D&D stuff is that that'll straight up flop. I'm anticipating that flopping hard, especially since I've heard they're hiring YouTubers and stuff to make games and do the sponsored content thing. They're going to push this really hard, and they're going to outspend what people are willing to buy. But I could be wrong. Let's face it, I am not Nostradamus. I just play an eldritch being on YouTube. So I won't take bets on that because I stand too good of a chance to lose. All right. Well, I have rambled on long enough. I have no idea where I'm going with the end of this. Thank you if you sat around through all that. I would like to remind everybody that if you are interested in supporting the channel, there is a membership link in the description. I would be oh so grateful if you chose to. However, if you don't, I completely understand, and I appreciate you just watching the videos. The amount of support I've gotten already, to me, is more than enough that anybody spends their time listening, commenting, hitting the subscribe button. All just those things alone mean the world to me. However, I also know if I don't occasionally remind you the memberships are there, no one will know. That's the way it is. I do plan to stream this Thursday. We will be doing more DragonAge Origins. I would like to thank my members. Some of these may be a little surprised since they were gifted memberships. I would like to thank DX Machina NZ, Emperor Doomsday, Zanzoltan, Snake Oil Sean, Schmitted, Psychotic Mongoose, Gage Champ, Peter Deek, Amalgu, Secret Genius, Entomego, Laran Jeko, Eric C., Cambone, and Olivian. A whole bunch of you got gifted some subs, or got gifted a membership the last time I did a stream, so congratulations. All that said, leave your comments in the comments where they obviously go. Let me know what you think about anything I said. And thank you. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the notifications. If you really liked it, you can feel free to share it around, and I will catch you later.